Hello, everyone. I am Caden, and thank you for joining us today in our AMA with Conrad Millen from Rippling. Of course, we're going to be recapping. I'll get right into the agenda here. We're going to be meeting and recapping some of Conrad's initiatives over at Rippling that he's utilizing Openprise for. In addition, we're also going to do a deep dive into some of that Dark TAM terminology, the findings around that, and then also ending with an audience AMA. So that is our agenda for today. I do want to start out by just introducing everybody to the concept of the chat. You should see that in the lower portion of your Zoom webinar meeting. So I'll give people some time to enter into there. And then I'll also start with a icebreaker question. I'll let you answer this, Conrad, as well, which is, do you prefer an aisle or a window seat on a plane? So I've got my answer. Put your answer in the chat, familiarize yourself with your chat box there for the AMA at the end. And then Conrad, I'll let you answer the icebreaker here.
Yeah, it's definitely aisle seat. I'm not a small person. I'm a little bit taller than most, so I try and stick my leg out into the aisle. I'm the person that the cart hits and stuff. So
Yep.
definitely aisle seat. Yeah.
Yeah. Same here. I also prefer the aisle. I think that it stems from a kind of desire not to have people stand up and move if I need to use the restroom, right? If you're in the aisle seat, you kind of have free will to go about that. I don't mind standing up for other people, but asking other people to stand up for me, it's one of those things where it's like, I'll just do that myself and be in the aisle myself and make that decision. Without the need for anybody else to move, right? So that's a little bit of context behind. Also, I love the extra room that you get in the aisle as well as a bigger person as myself. So, and it looks like our chat is confirming this with about a 53 to 47% aisle to window seat in the poll here that was in the chat. So looks like people are familiarized with the chat window. You use this same window to put any questions. And if you do have questions during the presentation, we are going to be answering those at the end. But if you want to just put your question down, enter it into the chat while it's fresh in your mind, certainly do that. But we will be addressing all of them toward the end of the presentation. So just wanted to clarify the expectation there. All right, and let's go ahead and start with some introductions. We'll start with myself first. I am Caden Bergeron, Solutions Engineer at Openprise, leading technical demonstrations, answering technical questions for all of our deal cycles with our clients like Rippling, and then also with new prospects that are coming in for our new business. So I'm really interested in the way that Conrad has been using us at Rippling. I think it opens a lot of opportunity, not just for ourselves, but for a lot of people to learn specifically from you, Conrad, and what you've done, not just at Rippling, right? But if you could, in your introduction, talk about just how many times you've used Openprise in the past and along your career.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for everyone for joining. Hopefully a subset of this audience caught my speech at Mopsapalooza, which is a lot of the similar content with a few twists on it. So, but I'm the VP of Growth Operations at Rippling. I lead really three distinct sub-departments. It's web, operations analytics teams, and then go-to-market engineering. We refer to as growth engineering. And yeah, it's actually true. I think that I'm a 3 times Openprise customer now, and I think each business that I've brought Openprise into, we've actually used it in different ways, which is probably a testament to the flexibility of the product. But originally, I'd spent about 5.5 years at Okta, and that was the first time I'd used Openprise. And we had brought it in for the company was going through multiple acquisitions, and there was a ton of data migration work. Cleaning of data, like a bunch of the normalization work, things like that across 2 different Salesforce instances. And we had brought it in to actually help us execute that. And then sort of fast forward after Okta, I joined a company called Clary, a sales forecasting B2B software company. And we had brought in Openprise to actually help us with sort of a multi-touch attribution framework and basically doing all this data aggregation work and then pushing into Salesforce and allowing for custom attribution reporting and a few other use cases there at Clary. And then fast forward all the way to the finish line, which is at Rippling, where I'm at today and have been the last 2 years. We've really brought in Openprise, and you're going to hear about some of it on the slide or on the content here today. But we brought in Openprise to really help be kind of the engine that powers some of our like core automated, always on marketing campaigns. One of which is email channel, which you're going to hear about today. So really three distinct use cases over my last 9 to 10 years of being in marketing ops. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Really cohesive introduction on yourself and how you've used Openprise in the past. Comprehensive, I should say. And yeah, let's get straight into how you're utilizing, what you're doing at Rippling today, how we're kind of fitting into those gaps for you in your current role too.
Yeah, that sounds good. So if some of you went to my Mobstapalooza session, but this is a second year I did it, and then the first year I actually discussed in sort of autonomous like marketing email program at scale. We refer to as MEC outreach. And essentially what I talked about was how do we achieve sort of emails at scale across all of our different markets and personas, and the high powered engine that we've built that allows us to send directly on behalf of sales reps mailboxes instead of sending through like a traditional MAP like Marketo or something of that nature. And so that was really year one. And then year two, this year when I came in, it was really around, how do we advance that program and how do we introduce AI into it? And really what the ultimate goal in the North Star was, how do we make every email that we write personalized and distinct from the other? And I think that ultimately what we've done now is about 50% of our program is fully written AI emails. And we basically these are some of the metrics that I'll talk through in a second. But essentially what the program does is we have an audience selection process every single day that runs of determining, okay, who do we want to email for today based on a bunch of different parameters. And we use that data to call out to an AI vendor that we retrieve insights against that person or the company. And then we basically, leveraging sort of internal LLMs and also third parties, we actually formulate an entire written AI email and then send it out on behalf of that sales rep. And really what the ultimate goal was not to like replace a sales rep. It really was to make them more efficient. A lot of the manual research and the things that they would do to write that same email, we attempted to basically automate on their behalf and have them spend more time during more impactful activities, things like phone calling, LinkedIning, researching, doing things like that. And so really the program after running it for several months, we now have a breakdown of about 50% of that program's emails are fully written by AI. And then about 30%, I would call it from vendor. Basically what that 30% number is it's tokenized personalization that we acquire through a bunch of different data providers. So it might say things like, hi Conrad at company name, insert company name. Saw you're in this type of a role, at job title or some personalized or normalized sort of job title framework. So that token based sort of type of emails is a 30% of the population, and then 20% is fully written by humans. So this is just stuff that is not personalized in any way, templated sort of versions. And this is really a breakout. And I think what we saw after sort of accomplishing this is the tokenized and the AI written stuff was pretty comparable from a performance standpoint. But I think one of the key differences was that the AI emails are very distinct from one another, and we'll have an example that we'll talk through here on this. But whereas the token-based, historical stuff that most companies do is still pretty similar, and it's much more detectable by, say, some of the, Google tracking algorithms and things for spam detection and some of the things they have in place. And so that was really the value that we actually saw, was just the ability of sending completely distinct emails at scale. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we'll jump into So that was kind of the first part one of my Mopsapalooza conversation, which was around applying AI to our at scale email program. And then what we did was something else we launched in tangent with that was our ability to autonomously find net new domains and accounts, and then be able to actually acquire people into those domains, and then enroll them right into that email based. It's machine learning based here, but that basically that email program at scale that has a machine learning audience selection process as well as AI written emails. And so step one of the what we call sort of our Dark TAM engine is essentially our ability to aggregate all of our unique domains across all of our third-party data providers. So things like review sites, other enrichment providers, and Google Analytics, website data, like a bunch of other sources. And basically, what we do is we built sort of a master data repository of all of our unique domains. And what we essentially did was we built a series of jobs, and Openprise is a part of the series of jobs that we've done to execute this. But essentially, we find that net new domain, and then we actually kick off a process from a fully homegrown internal solution we called LSW. It allows us to submit a domain to it, and then it does a bunch of third-party API calls to acquire all of the personas that we care to sell to from that domain. And it essentially pulls back all those people, and then essentially with those people, we create them in our CRM, and then we basically enroll them into the machine learning based recommendation engine for our email program. And what that ML model does is it basically allows us to say, okay, we've got these net new people at these accounts. We want to determine what is the best sequence to send to them. So it actually looks at historical email sequence performance, and then determines, okay, which sequence we want to drop them into on behalf of the sales rep. So again, it's sort of this fully autonomous series of jobs that help us find new accounts, acquire people into those accounts, create them in our Salesforce, and then enroll those people in some emails and other channels. And this engine is just kind of always on and running for the business. And it's also our ability to like enter in new markets really effectively, or one of the key things for us as a company is like VC backed, which is our ability to sell to VC backed startups, because Rippling is a really effective tool for small startups. And so what we do is we actually go acquire this TAM. We look for domains that have recently gone through funding via Crunchbase or things like that, and then run these processes that allow us to execute this at scale.
Awesome. And I think we actually have an example of one of the emails from your presentation at Mopsapalooza. So
Yeah.
just through, sort of those differences that you mentioned here.
Yeah, I'll let the folks on the call, take a read through this really quickly. But I think, one of the things that you're probably telling yourself is when you read this email, you're probably like, oh, it looks like an AI written email, and we've got feedback and we've got ongoing improvements to make to this model. But essentially, what is pretty powerful about it is obviously this in this email particularly, they're referencing this person's post that they did on LinkedIn about their dog, Augie. And then it goes through sort of a pitch about Rippling and how we automate a lot of the HR and IT tasks, references the company name, things like that. But I think what is like really powerful about the AI itself is really that third line. So that third line that says, plus with automatic tax registrations, you can grow your team across states without worrying about compliance. This one actually on the surface doesn't look like it was AI, right? It's just referencing something in sort of a general as you expand into states. But that line is actually derived from an article about that company that they were expanding into multiple states. And so somebody on the surface would actually read that and think that it doesn't look personalized to them, but it actually relates much to what their business is and what it's doing. And so we find that to be the most impactful way for AI is, whether referencing Augie shows overall improvement in performance. That third line is really what is the value prop that will help somebody understand, like, oh, this is a pain point in my business, and this is where it helps. And so we've through all these iterations, we've been able to actually improve the performance across the board for these types of emails.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff here. I think it definitely for me starts a lot of questions in my mind, which will obviously lead into the next slide. I've got, some questions for you here, but I do want to first kind of introduce some concepts specific to Openprise and the way that we would, define some of the framework around data quality on which my questions are built. So let's get into that real quick. That looks just like this. So the data integrity pyramid, the foundational component here at the bottom, number one, for technical quality, can you trust the data, right? This is basic things like the cleanliness of the data. Are things deduped? Are things normalized? Is there proper unification across systems into one source of truth, wherever that may be? That's what lives here at the bottom. Then we can up-level that conversation into operational quality. So that's, can you take timely actions? Can you do things like routing, segmentation, matching based on that solid technical quality foundation? And then finally, up here at the top, right, can you make the right decisions? Are you able to show these impactful strategic initiatives like maybe attribution built upon, both the technical data quality foundation and the operational data quality middle layer? Am I able to get insightful information and make the right decisions from those systems? And we can see how kind of one's built upon the other here. So I do have some questions for you, Conrad. We'll do a deep dive, though, into the Dark TAM engine and let you kind of explain exactly the solution that you've built out. And then I've got obviously questions across that solutioning on how you kind of leveraged Openprise. So let me hand it off to you to walk us through the Dark TAM, what you've built today over at Rippling.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is sort of piggybacking off the last stuff I was just discussing, but I'll kind of give a kind of a high level walkthrough of the sort of the step-by-step end-to-end process for folks that are really interested. And so essentially, starting with sort of step one is that centralization of data and the cleaning of data. So our ability to have what we call sort of our master TAM table, right? And this is all of our data through all third-party providers, first-party data, all centralized and aggregated, deduped, cleaned, waterfalled, all that into one sort of single location. And we do that today in Snowflake, our data warehouse. And essentially what we have is we now have this sort of unique data set. And what we do is we have automation that recognizes a net new domain that gets populated. And that table is actually growing as we add new providers, as providers continue to expand their data sets, things like that. And so we have the ability to recognize a new domain. We have a bunch of criteria into what is acceptable for our business for as far as what can be an account in Salesforce. So we have a bunch of logic that says like, this types of industries, this types of employee sizes, things like that, right? These types of countries, everything under there. And essentially we grab back those domains, we actually run them through a website validator to make sure it's real and not bad data. And once we get back that it's a valid URL, it's crawled the website, determine that, we then go create the account in Salesforce, right? And we actually go automatically create it. And then what we do against that account is we call it intent and event signals internally. But on top of just those master TAM tables, there's one that's called intent and event signals that aggregates all of essentially marketing interactions across that account and people into that account. And so everything from like website visit to email click to webinar attendee to every possible review site for that domain, every possible sort of marketing interaction. And we sync that data against that account into a custom object and provide visuals for our sales reps to be able to get insight into what's happening at that account. And so we sync all that data through. And then the next thing we do is we can actually route that account based on territory, regions, things like that to a sales rep and actually notify them. And then we also reach down to any leads that are existing in Salesforce and actually convert them from leads to contacts under that account to increase data integrity and coverage for that account for the rep. And this is also obviously a manual task that a lot of sales reps have to execute today. We do it all, automatically. And then once that's kind of completed, we actually then run that homegrown solution I told you about called Lead Search Waterfall that finds net new people. And then we actually go create them as contacts under that account for folks that we do find. And then the last thing is once we have all this data, all the people, all of the company information, the intents and event signals, we run a predictive scoring model against that account and determine if it's a high fit account for the sales team. And so essentially this entire process we call the Dark TAM engine is a full end-to-end recognizing new data, and then all the way to the completion of like it's a created in Salesforce, routed to a human, scored, and in somebody's territory. And Openprise has helped us essentially as a decent portion of this slide in order to execute it. I would say really everything from 3 down to sort of 5. Openprise is sort of an engine that helps us execute a lot of the data tasks here. Yeah.
Yeah. So you actually just answered my first question, right? Which is where you're leveraging Openprise in this process. A lot of those um doing those I cannot say that word today. Opera Oh my goodness.
Let's call it operations tasks. Let's call it that.
Yes, those operation tasks, operationalizing. That's definitely the word. I think I was saying it right. But yeah, that opera, I'm not going to try it again.
Yeah.
Getting that data how you need it to be, right? So, I love that. I think I've got some other questions for you here, right? If there's kind of more to up level this a little bit into Openprise, is there a specific Openprise automation that you couldn't live without?
Yeah. Let's see. I would say I would say the ability to, yeah, couldn't live without. So I'd say one is like the ability to have an API enabled bot is definitely very powerful for us to have sort of a real time series of jobs that can execute from an API call is very powerful. I think the ability to schedule bots is a new functionality that got released. Very exciting for us to schedule it during weekdays and do things like that. That's very
Mhm.
powerful. And then the last thing is more, I would say more unique, but I think the ability to infer against other jobs and data sources within a task is very effective. Essentially, doing sort of a SQL join at scale is very powerful. It allows us to like we're such a data first company, and we aggregate a ton of data within Openprise and other systems and things, and so the ability to actually go pull in data from all these places and run jobs against it is very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Feel you there. I think another key point in there is just the ability to understand what's been done. A lot of the data logs that exist there as well. I know you've spoken about that before.
Yes, auditing for
Yeah,
sure. Huge. Couldn't live without it. The ability to audit jobs and execution of tasks and things like that is just super powerful. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I think specific in this, right? Thinking about Openprise as a communal data layer to connect various different sources like you had mentioned, how many integrations are you leveraging through Openprise for this process, right?
Yeah.
You can think of a number of them off the top of your head, just a few of them. That would be great.
Yeah, I would say probably 3 to 4 roughly. But the reason I say that is that we do a lot of this process and other processes we do a lot of upstream work to centralize data within our warehouse. And then what we do is we connect to Openprise via Snowflake or S3 buckets or different data sources. And Openprise really does the orchestration of that data into some of our core systems. And so what I would say is like we actually, well, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll try and leverage Openprise to take in data, process it, orchestrate it. But what we'll do is we'll do a lot of work to make sure that that data is in a good spot in like S3, Salesforce, Snowflake, one of those core systems, basically. The other thing to call it too is we do store data directly in Openprise, which is pretty powerful. We talked about a communal data layer. So the idea that we store data within manual data sources, we call them MDSs for those of you that aren't familiar with Openprise, but the ability for us to actually store data and use it as almost like a little mini warehouse is pretty powerful for us as well. So we do a lot set up there, and some of which actually is referenced in these jobs too. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that covers, I think, a lot of the sourcing in the data, how you're leveraging manual data sources. Where are you sending the data, right? So those data targets, same data targets, different systems, maybe understanding not just the source, but where you're actually sending some of this out. So obviously, Salesforce is a huge part of that, but
Yeah.
anyone else?
Yeah, Salesforce being the primary one for this one, obviously, because it's regarding like sales TAM creation and things like that. So Salesforce is the primary here. We do a lot with S3, Google Sheets as well. So we do a lot there. Um, yeah, I would say mostly that for this process. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then final question from me before we get to some of the questions that have popped up in the chat here. So you've used Openprise before landing at Rippling, right? And kind of knowing that and understanding that you were already pretty much a power user of our system. How long did it take you to build this process at Rippling? And, was there a lot of trial and error involved? What's your story there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's this version, Dark TAM, is actually in like three different, I would call like three different versions. I don't have to get into details around the call, but we have a couple different processes that run through Openprise that are related to people creation, account creation, all this stuff, outside of even just Dark TAM. But I would say all in all, like from sort of a timeline perspective, I would say it took us probably about a month and a half to accomplish this, which is actually pretty fast. I would say about 7 weeks. And I think that I think it's a testament for how our ability to move quickly. Because I think that if somebody tried to probably build this within Salesforce natively or to do things like that, I'd imagine it would be a longer timeline to execute this. So yeah, I would say roughly about that. Hard. We built this a couple of years ago, so it's hard to remember exactly, but yeah, around there.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I know that we've got a lot of burning questions in the chat, so we'll actually go ahead and move forward in to the questions that have come up in the chat here. If you've got a question, go ahead and add it. Let me transition here, and we'll start just right at the top. Pretty sure this one is for you, Conrad. What KPIs do you use to evaluate the success of AI-driven outreach?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Obviously important to measure performance for this stuff. So we historically folks usually look at email performance from a open click reply, right? And then some form of an attribution that ties that to opportunity. And the one of the primary issues is that some of the tools like Outreach or they've just introduced, I think, their first version of it, but they're not really effective with sentiment analysis. So they can't really tell you was it a positive or a negative reply. So the number one metric we had for AI written emails was in general was positive reply rate. And the way we extract that is through a machine learning based model that looks at all of our reply tasks in Salesforce. So every version of a reply, and it calculates whether it is a negative, neutral, or positive reply. And then we sync that data to Salesforce and do certain things with it. And so that's really the key thing, the key metric for email performance is how many positive replies can you generate. And yeah, actually, I'll close it out with that. That's like the primary metric. Yeah.
Perfect. I think follow up to that with the AI summary in many email clients now, how are you optimizing for that?
Yeah, there's not much you can do to optimize for that. In full honesty, I think, Google being a little bit of the black box of how they measure spam and how they do things like that is it's an ongoing battle. And I think that ultimately what we leaned in on was less that it's going to be a perfect machine, which it's not going to be, and more so that we really just wanted to empower sales reps to send personalized content and to also allow us to send very distinct emails in general. And our hope is that we can become, let's say, a higher reputable or reputation company by sending such distinct emails. And that's really what we lean into, less so that we're going to be able to, obviously trick the behemoth of Google. Yeah.
Perfect. Next question that I see here is my understanding is that LLMs are trained on old data, like nothing newer than a couple years. How do you avoid sending an email about a dog that has since passed away or the equivalent?
Yeah, this is a really good call out. We did a lot of prompt engineering with AI in order for us to make sure that it wasn't doing anything. What we mostly do for the AI written emails is we look at stuff that's very recent. So we extract things about that person or LinkedIn posts or things like that we know about them that allows us to feel confidence that we're sending something that is relative. But yeah, it is something that we continuously have to monitor. We have to make sure that we're sending quality stuff. We give a lot of oversight for the sales reps, so they have the ability to check things, look at the emails before they're sent. A lot of times we actually queue them up to the sales rep, and they can determine if they do want to send it or not send it. So there's a lot of that's built in to apply some governance to this thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost had a follow up there, which is we see this in sometimes in scoring, right? Time decay, time decaying information specifically. You're probably utilizing it, or maybe I can ask, like, if you're utilizing specific time parameters on right the information that you are able to pick up from LinkedIn, maybe nothing older than 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have some governance, like time windows in which we say no more or things like that for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. It looks like we got a question here, came in during the presentation. I haven't heard AI mentioned yet. I'm curious about the integration of AI with Openprise repository data. This might be a me question, so let me just quickly introduce AI inside of Openprise, right? So we do have an Ask AI task template inside of Openprise that helps us to look at unstructured data and make sense of it. Also, we're starting to utilize it in a variety of different ways. It's important to note also that we've got integrations with Open API that you can leverage if you have an account with Open API. But we also have an embedded LLM within the product, so your data never leaves Openprise if you want to leverage that. But that's really the capabilities of the Openprise product today when it comes to AI and utilizing, that as part of your workflows that you might build there. Let's get back to a question for you, Conrad. I think this next one. Do you run A/B splits within these AI generated outbound emails? Like what works better, a personal reference like Augie the dog versus a company news reference? Seems like you'd want to test to optimize the key AI elements.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons of A/B testing, tons of experimentation, constantly iterating, changing the prompt engineering, changing what type of content we want to send. There's an ongoing sort of tactical team that is executing this stuff on a weekly, monthly basis. But yeah, super important to experiment, and it's a huge part of our internal operating cadence. Yeah.
Perfect. Another one for you here. Are you using a bulk email sender like SendGrid or AMS? And is it directed by an Openprise instruction?
No, it's conversations about that historically have taken place, but today we use outreach and Google mailboxes. We use the reps mailbox. We make it, like I said, there's a lot of, we're not really doing this behind the scenes without sales. Sales has a lot of oversight into this, and so a lot of what we're doing is teeing it up for them in outreach and their Google accounts and things like that. There was conversations around pulling it out of that work stream and leveraging the sort of a third party email service provider, but have not gone that far yet. No.
Perfect. And looks like that was the last question there. I'll give it a couple minutes, waiting for some additional ones. But while we do that, I'll go ahead and leave our audience, with some next steps here. You can see the QR code. You can actually download the authoritative guide to RevOps data quality directly from Openprise. So leaving you with something at the end of all of this. And, we appreciate you tuning in, watching, asking questions. Really appreciate it. Looks like we don't have any more questions coming in at this point. So Conrad, I'll hand it off to you to say farewell for us. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, Caden. Appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful content for you. And feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any other questions, and hope to chat soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.